So we'll start taking questions. Anybody want to start?
Don't go all at once.
No.
There you go.
Go ahead.
When you think about the institutes that have been set up by the Obama administration, you've got a lot of companies that are here as part of the event that are not American-based companies. So does the administration not allow them to participate within that environment, or is there a way for them to do co-innovation with those institutes?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer is that all of the institutes operate under the same principle, where essentially this is an U.S. initiative attempting to develop the capabilities of U.S. companies. However, there is a waiver or a caveat which allows non-U.S. companies like a Siemens based in Germany or Rolls-Royce based in the UK to become a member of any of the institutes, and both of those companies were members of DMDII, if they have an entity in the United States that's doing significant manufacturing in the United States and is incorporated under one of the 50 states. So because Siemens, for example, has a big operation in the state of Illinois, they could become a member. And Rolls-Royce, which has a huge operation in Indiana, could become a member. And so if your company is a Japanese company with an operation in the United States, you can become a member.
Yes.
Okay, Mike Ditzik from ArcelorMittal DeFasco. So a question for Leandre. So our company is 100 years old. We just celebrated a few years ago there, very successful within the steel business. You talk about a lot of companies attending this that are also very well-established, long-standing, and now are seeing all this great technology, like myself over the years, and we're trying to chart a map, strategy, roadmap for how do we convert our industry in this digital enterprise, Industry 4.0. We're seeing some activities in that. What advice would you give companies like ours and others from what you've learned at your facility there? How do we get started? How do we get engagement? How do we get, how did you get management buy-in and activities? Because you still want to make money, but you also need to move forward for the future with all these new technologies. So what would be your playbook, roadmap that you might give as examples for all us traditional manufacturers that need to move forward here?
That is an excellent question, and I will get into some level of detail so that all of us can capture. Everything comes down to, as I said, satisfying the customers. What is our value proposition? What do we deliver to the customers to have them having to come to us and acquire from us? Then technology will assist us to better deliver those. So we want to reduce cycle time, so reducing the time it takes from conception to delivery. We want to improve reliability and quality. And all that, we use technology to do it. The technology is not the starting point. The starting point is the value proposition of the company, and that never moves. That is why the company is incorporated and exists. But then the technology is an enabler. So we look at a technology as enabler. In my company, we made a choice starting from the organization, to be more concrete, starting from the organization. How do we manage technology in the company? We have several companies in the world that have a corporate R&D. You have a large group of people that stay in a building and they manage technology that is then transferred to the business units. Well, my experience of 30 years in industry is that over time, such an organization becomes an entity by itself and distance itself from the day-by-day operations. So then people start calling them and say, oh, you mean the ivory tower? So we didn't want to have an ivory tower. So we started by targeting the technologies that we need. And around those technologies, we created a core team of highly trained experts, PhDs, masters, around those core technologies. And then we network those people to subject matter expert in the business units, and then we network them toward all the external entities, national labs. We are a member of most of the organizations that we're talking about, universities. And instead of calling that a center of excellence, we call it a network of excellence. So we have network of excellence for different technologies in the company. By doing so, we have the focus on the technologies that we're targeting. We have also the opportunity for those people to work directly with the business units because they develop capabilities and then disseminate those capabilities through project in the business unit as they leverage partnership to further our capabilities, to keep us at the cutting edge of technology. So we bring all those things through projects. Technologies are enablers. They are not a means for themselves, but they are enablers to satisfy the customers. So in succinct way, we can continue the discussion, we can connect, and I can tell you more, but I don't want to take the win from other people's sales.
If I may add on to that, and certainly I echo the comments of what I said in the earlier session, is that we are here to make the world a better place through hardware, and that goes back to the purpose of who are you serving as a consumer. The one thing I will challenge that you just made is both on the definition of cycle time and how do you really reduce cycle time right from production to concept, and really the perspective on reliability and durability. So on the cycle time, it's an interesting concept. So we're talking to the U.S. Marine Corps, which is and DoD, which is focusing on additive or is taking a journey in additive. And so U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps, they have forward operating bases, and they're trying to really take additive to those forward operating bases and eliminate really the requirement to go through a traditional DoD supply chain from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and take it as close to the warfighter as possible. And one perspective, interestingly enough, is they have big shipping containers. When they go and deploy, you put a lot of stuff in big shipping. Now imagine if you can 3D print those shipping containers. And then once they're at the forward operating base, because they're 3D printed, you can actually repurpose that material and take that material into making actual components or parts or vehicles or other things in the field based on repurposed containers. So it reduces your cycle time on getting vehicles in the field. It also repurposes material and eliminates the cost of a shipping container. So that's a perspective on cycle time, that potentially this technology will enable. The other thing on reliability, so we're working with USPS, and I had the innovation team from USPS in there, and I'm pretty sure their average life expectancy on a USPS vehicle is probably 10 to 15 years, Well, what happens if our whole purpose isn't to go and design a vehicle for 10 to 15 years, but to design a vehicle to last 18 to 24 months until the next greatest and latest technology is available from a hardware perspective to put in that vehicle. So now you can design completely different for reliability and durability. You don't have to make a vehicle to go last 300,000 miles or 10 years or 15 years. You make a vehicle that basically has a life expectancy of 18 months, and if frankly at 18 months it falls apart, you don't care because you've now upgraded to the next. So I think with this technology we have to completely rethink the concepts of some of these traditional time, quality, cost metrics that we look at and within our organizations. Clearly I was going too long and he told me.
No, I agree. And talking about changing the mindset that we have, look at Uber technologies that is using a geolocation and an app enabling people to be able to know where they are and then get a car. All the existing companies, taxi companies, try it and fight it. So one thing that companies need to keep in mind is don't fight it, embrace it. Is because the technologies are here to stay, and that's why I talk about enabler rather than enemies. Yes.
I'm gonna duck out after this question.
Hello?
Yes.
Barbara Mangano from Alcoa, also a 100-plus-year-old company. And I think our motivation for the digital factory of the future in terms of automation and robots and stuff like that has gone from just being a value add proposition, because we're a commodity. Aluminum's a commodity. We don't really control our pricing model. So we look at cost of production within the plant, and the main cost of production, of course, is labor and our capital equipment and refurbishing that equipment. So our automation initiatives are built on employee safety and equipment safety. We have initiatives of worker on foot separation, keep the worker away from mobile equipment, and to also have repetitive use of mobile equipment that is not influenced by human interaction, which is where it's not wear and tear that wears out the equipment, it's the crash into the wall or crashing two vehicles together that wear out the equipment. So through automation, we want to eliminate those failure modes. So I haven't heard anybody talk about employee safety. You touched on it a little bit where you said make this world a better place for people to work in, and that's what Alcoa is trying to do in that regard. And I just wanted to offer that that's where our motivation is from our executive level, is every worker is going to go home that day. So it's a little, I haven't heard a safety twist on automation yet so much. Just want to offer that as a comment.
I'll start. I think we probably all might have something to comment on this. It's a great question. We have talked about the cohabitation of the worker with the robot, and that's one of the things that we've been talking about in terms of tech advancement of technology and safety. And we are moving into that. And in fact, you saw the one slide where it showed the workers working right beside the robot. Okay, now this is all going to be predicated on the processes and the industry that it's applied to. There's no doubt that if you go back into the automotive industry, the traditional, conventional automotive industry of production lines today, upstream robots and robot work cells are not going to go away, and they're going to keep them caged and so on and so forth. I think you have to apply that. And I think the safety issue is something that is, it had to be addressed, or we couldn't even talk about having a cohabitation. We couldn't talk about having robots and people and human workers in the same environment. So, and there's some really very interesting and amazing technologies being applied to that in terms of sensing and proximity sensing and so forth in the robots. We know that's out there, that's working. It's just going to increase. You have to base this on, well, what do you make? How do you make it? What's your production line? Is there going to be a need? It goes back to this notion that all of us have been talking about here, is take the technology and apply it where it's the most beneficial. Obviously, safety is paramount, and it always has been. The whole issue with robots is why we kept them in cages. But we're moving beyond that, and it's happening now, and it's going to continue to happen more. So it's just a matter of how it's applied and how the technology is applied, I think, in the future.
If I could just jump in and just have a quick comment, and then I got to run to a previous commitment that I have. Your question is a great question, and I just want to mention that in the proposal for what is this particular robotics institute going to focus on, the number one thing, they identified 6 specific areas of technology that they intend to perform their research in. And the number one thing they identified is the development of better collaborative robots, meaning robots that can work next to humans without killing them or smashing them in the head. So that you, as Dick says, you got to have better sensors, you got to have better dexterous control, you got to have lots of improvement in robots, but the goal is to make them more safe in the factory floor. And just for your information, then I'm going to run. The other 5 areas that this institute will focus on is collaborative robots, robot controls, particularly learning, adaptation, and repurposing, dexterous manipulation, recreating the human hand, autonomous navigation, perception and sensing, and testing, verification, and validation. That's the sort of realm in which the research will take place. Sorry to run and be rude, but I got to go. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so we still have a,
One thing that,
go ahead,
back to
sorry.
the point, we talked to a company that was going after these robotics. We were asking, how do you get buy-in? Because you see as a threat that it's taking jobs away. They said go after your safety issues first, because most operators, when they've been getting hurt on the job, they're pretty accepting of this type of automation to do what's perceived as a dangerous job where they're getting joints hurt or fingers smashed. And so it's really kind of a great place to start in looking at automation, is find your safety areas that have had injuries and think about what a robot can do for that. So that's just a comment that we've learned.
Yeah, one thing I'll say quick, talking about robot. Many years ago, I was consultant in Europe in robotics. And we were designing robots, thinking about degrees of freedom, space of operation, and it has changed completely. The volume in which we control the robot and the movement and so on, it has changed completely lately. People are looking into modeling and simulation and all the mechatronics that govern the robots, and they see even more people than we could see each other. We could bump into each other, and robot has so many sensors that sense a map exactly, even heat. From a heat standpoint, it will sense the proximity of where the person is. So you are correct. 3 levels of safety: public safety for those autonomous vehicles that we see, public safety, employee safety, equipment safety, and your head for your company is at the right place.
Okay, we have time for probably
One more question.
One more question, yeah.
I'm Edward from Radix. You talk about specific for locomotives. You talk about very short lifespan for possible vehicles. So, how are you concerned, or how recyclable are your parts and vehicles today?
Well, so good question. I think that's why we say it's inspired by cradle to cradle, and there's a whole set of study behind that and some really smart people who talk about that concept. So we're inspired by that, and that's where we're aiming to, but we're probably some ways from actually implementing it, right? And so right now we have, because of the relationships with Oak Ridge and some of the work we've done on the material side, we're starting, there's a way in order to be able to repurpose the material that you have to have the ingoing materials, and then how you can actually modify it through the manufacturing process to be optimal for recyclability or repurposing the material. So we're working, and we're at kind of the infancy of that perspective. So in the meanwhile, we still have to, I think, engineer our vehicles to be, long-lasting and durable. What I was saying earlier is more conceptual, and we're taking steps towards that journey. But a lot of our vehicles, we're still targeting at kind of that 10-year lifespan. But in the future, if you have a business model where, one, you're not asking people to buy your vehicles, but you're actually subscribing to them, or allowing them to subscribe to them, just like you subscribe to your iPhone and AT&T plan, right? And you have a monthly fee that the AT&T actually subsidizes your hardware, and then as you go through that contract of 18 or 24 months, you upgrade your hardware. It's a similar process that we're envisioning, but we're still some ways from actually being able to execute it. We think right now, for example, the Strati, right? We can't fully recycle the battery and the tires yet, even though some people are working on that, and even the motor. But we think we can repurpose it, right? End of life for a battery, to get to 80% is probably 5 years. So if you upgrade every 2 years, you probably have 2.5 vehicles for that one battery. But it also depends on, if I go have a 2-seater and now I want a 4-seater, and one was 500 pounds and another one's a 1,000-pound vehicle, I probably need a different powertrain to get to meet my requirements. So there's a lot of factors to consider, but that's kind of the process that we're starting to go down, to be able to repurpose not just some of the components, but then for the core material to actually repurpose that and grind it up and turn it back into raw material.
Okay, I think it's lunchtime. Hungry faces. So thanks everyone for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the content and the topic. I think it was some pretty good stuff here. And grab any of us, any of you, or if you want to extend any of these conversations and talk about things, we're all here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.